Hello, I'm Catalina Mejía and I'm going to share with you my findings on my process with my research project so far. I hope you can get interested and can give me some feedback and different ideas or perspective. My research question is how to conduct an international purchasing process of full package garments abroad for a family business GCO. GCO stands for Grupo Comercializador, which is a textile group I work for and is one of the biggest textile groups in Colombia. My research will respond to a how question, so my focus will be on a process, understanding the process and the different steps to accomplish a goal. In order to understand the reasons why I decided to work on this research, it is important to know some data from the textile industry in Colombia. Textile industry generates around 600,000 employments in Colombia, which represents 6% of the Colombian GDP and 24% of the workforce employed. However, the knowledge in the textile industry in Colombia is very empirical and there is not accurate knowledge transfer process. For the particular case of the purchasing process, the import of textile products as well as raw materials have increased during the last years in Colombia. The increase in year 2018 was 24.7%, which shows an important number to support my research focus. On the other hand, when consulting secondary data for the sector in the last 5 years, I found that there is a lack of case study or documentation of the international purchasing process. Here is the key concepts from my literature review. Textile industry in Colombia, globalization, competitiveness, protectionism, apparel supply chain, sourcing patterns, multicultural and virtual teams. Globalization is an important concept when thinking about an internationalization process. For this particular case of the textile industry, globalization has been seen as a threat to the industry. Globalization in the sector textile is seen in some cases as a synonym of smuggling. My research project looks for another perspective, an opportunity to learn from companies and countries with high textile technology and capacities, build synergies, and buy products that cannot be produced in Colombia due to lack of raw materials, machineries, and qualified workforce. This will be supported by articles as the ones from International Business course we have studied before, in which they mention that globalization allows companies to outsource value chain activities to most favorable locations worldwide. Also, global competition and innovation frequently help to lower consumer prices. And finally, firms with cross-border business create millions of jobs that raise living standards around the world. This leads to another important subject, competitiveness. Based on some concepts from the article by Jamil Andrea Montenegro on Latin American Business Review, we have here in Colombia some problematic situations such as corruption, tax payment, and inadequate infrastructure that prevents companies to be competitive. With this said, industry leaders need to think about an alternative business unit to improve the international purchasing process. That is why I'm interested on this subject. Protectionism is another factor to be considered at the time of looking for an expansion on the international arena. Textile industry importers are facing a new tariff suggested by the National Development Plan 2018-2022. It will establish an additional tariff to textile imports to Colombia that affects the importers, but in the long run will affect the most the consumers directly, since garments will cost higher. It will be around 25% more. On the other side, we have another important key concept, global apparel supply chain. All be supported by a Harvard Business School article in which they study about fast fashion. The way Grupo Inditex works, its global apparel chain, is very interesting for my research since it helps me to understand their process from producers to final customers. Sourcing patterns is other important key concept for my literature review. The sourcing and the purchase process are connected, and the sourcing practices all over the world will be an important source for my research. As mentioned on an article of the Journal of Purchasing and Supply Management about the future changes in sourcing patterns 2025 outlook for the Swedish textile industry, social, environmental, and political factors are expected to become increasingly important for future sourcing decisions. So it is a matter of internal analyzing internal factors and external factors what is gonna give the pattern to do the sourcing in the future. As we have learned on previous course about multicultural communication and international business, we are facing a cross-cultural environment in which it is necessary to use skills and abilities to lead multicultural teams that work virtually. This will be an important part of my research since the success of the purchasing process relies on the relation between supplier and buyers. All I have mentioned will be research under an ethical decision making process that protects human rights and looks for the sustainability of the business. Finally, as you can see, I will focus on secondary data sources of information, and I will also do some interviews and observation to the top 5 international textile purchasing departments in Colombia. As far as my literature review, my limitation would be the lack of information and the difficulty to get information from the actors about the international purchasing process. Thank you very much for your attention and feel free to give me a feedback.